What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and the Super Bowl trailer for Doctor Strange 2 dropped, which has all kinds of stuff in it, and has a lot more than the first trailer did. And in fact, some of the stuff in the first trailer has actually been changed, and we'll talk more about that. But I feel like I might have an idea of what's going on here in Doctor Strange 2, that Wanda really is the focal point of it all, how it is Wanda's the bad guy, and what's actually going on. But we'll talk about that once we get to the end of this whole breakdown, right? Let's break this trailer down. So first things first, one of the things that we get here is Doctor Strange saying that he always has the same kind of like dream, right? And then he wakes up and the nightmare really begins. I mean, obviously it's not meant to be taken as a literal phrase. It's not like I have the same dream and then when I wake up, nightmare's in the corner of my room smiling at me, although that would be creepy, but amazing at the same time, because I really want to see Nightmare. Nightmare looks awesome. He looks like a garage band guy meets like a punk rocker. Like he kind of bridges the gap between those two things. But the important thing here, and this is actually something that was spotted by Gordon, my chief creative officer, what he thinks is going on, which I really think is a great idea, that what Doctor Strange is seeing when he sleeps are his alternate reality versions dying. That's basically what's happening, right? When he goes to bed and he sees like this version of himself being destroyed or something like that, he's seeing his alternate reality counterpart destroyed. Now, there is room for this from Marvel Comics. So for those of you guys who never read Spider-Verse, you probably heard of the character Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099. During the Spider-Verse event, there was an alternate reality version of himself that it basically created a headband that made it possible for him to locate different versions of Spider-Man 2099 from around the multiverse. And so what this did is it created a kind of psychic link between all these various versions of Miguel O'Hara from across the multiverse, so that if one was destroyed, that eventually Miguel O'Hara in the main Marvel universe could both see it and feel it. So there is room for this, for Doctor Strange to be experiencing the death of the different versions of himself from across the multiverse. Now, following that, we get this really cool scene where America Chavez is basically being stared down by the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, and she opens a portal behind herself, which seemingly pulls herself in. Now, this is really cool, right? Because right around that time, you get Defender Strange, who seemingly is either pulled through the portal or pushed through the portal, and basically looks like he's dead, right? It looks like he's just kind of falling through the portal as like a dead person. Maybe he's alive. We're not 100% sure. But I would say that this Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, right, that are basically like staring down and seemingly screaming at America Chavez, that may very well actually be Cyttorak. Now, if it is, man. Okay, so here's the thing. Cyttorak is a hoss. Dude, this guy is an absolute monster when it comes to power in Marvel Comics, and it's really kind of nuts. Now, some of you guys may have heard of Cyttorak, some of you all may have not. In the scene during Infinity War, when Doctor Strange shot those red bands at Thanos, those were the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, right? I mean, it's one of those things, he's so powerful that Doctor Strange and other Sorcerer Supreme, and even other people who just use magic, actually invoke the power of Cyttorak. And in fact, Cyttorak is so powerful that Dormammu will invoke the power of Cyttorak if he needs to. It's really kind of nuts just how powerful this guy is. One of the other reasons you guys may have heard of Cyttorak is because there was a point in time in Marvel Comics when the brother of Professor Charles Xavier, who we'll talk about here in a second, a man named Cain Marko, touched a stone that he was not supposed to touch. And there was an inscription that was written on there that said, "Whosoever touches this gem shall possess the power of the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak. Henceforth, you who read these words shall become forevermore a human Juggernaut." Now, does that mean that we are getting Juggernaut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? I don't know. I have no idea. I just thought it was a cool reference. So that's one of the things. Like, it looks, I mean, normally whenever the Crimson Bands activate, it's only ever because Cyttorak makes them or because something else is going on, usually with Doctor Strange. Again, we'll talk about that as we circle back around to the end of this. But again, focusing on Defender Strange, it is cool to see him. He does look cool, but it's hard to tell whether or not he's actually alive. In fact, I would go as far as to say that that looks like a reality that America Chavez happened to be in or was possibly passing through, where Doctor Strange was killed in that universe. Now, why it was he was killed by Cyttorak or the Crimson Band seemingly operating of their own accord, we'll actually talk about here in a little bit. Again, we'll kind of circle back around to that. But the other cool thing is about 27 seconds into this trailer, you see Doctor Strange basically kind of manifesting the, at least seemingly the multiverse or different worlds, all of which are red. That looks like the Darkhold. Now, whether or not he has it in his possession or not, we're not 100% sure, but it would make sense that he would. And the reason why is because we know Wanda had the Darkhold. At least last time we saw her at the end of WandaVision. And if he and Wanda are actually working together, it would make sense that Stephen Strange would be like, I'm gonna need that Darkhold, or like take it or ask Wanda for it and she gives it to him, whatever the case happens to be. But it would make sense that he would have it in his possession. The question you have to ask is, would Doctor Strange know how to use it effectively, right? Because one of the things to know is that Stephen Strange is the Sorcerer Supreme, but even by his own admission, there's still a lot of stuff he doesn't know. And so when you're talking about this thing or something like the Darkhold, it's possible that he knows it's dangerous, but he doesn't know exactly what he's getting into by meddling with it. Whether or not that's actually the case, not 100% sure. Doesn't lend a lot of credence to the idea of being the Sorcerer Supreme if you don't know about something as significant as a Darkhold. But regardless, when you jump forward a little bit, of course, you get the Ultron robots. Now, initially, and the funny thing about this is when I first saw them, I was kind of hoping they were Doombots. Obviously, they're not, they're Ultron robots. But as we know from the different leaks and little things that have come out, it looks like, of course, these are being controlled by Tony Stark. And one of the cool things about this is this looks like it contains a bit of a homage to like Marvel Comics, specifically a couple of different stories. The first one could be like the trial of Magneto, and the second one could be the trial of Reed Richards. Now, of course, this is obviously Doctor Strange being put on trial here, but the important thing is that the look of it, the feel of it, seems reminiscent of those two things. Of course, the trial of Magneto basically being the story where Magneto handed himself over to the authorities to atone for his past misdeeds. The trial of Reed Richards is where you basically learn the reality of like Galactus, the significance of Galactus, that like he has to exist in the universe and that people are just going to have to die because of his existence, just the way it is. Sorry about your luck. That was literally the trial of Reed Richards, right? Like that was literally the story, right? Like eternity, the living embodiment of the universe, showed up to everybody at the trial of Reed Richards, the Shi'ar, the Kree, the Skrull, all those guys, gave them cosmic awareness, showed them the grand tapestry of the universe, and was like, yeah, man, Galactus has to kill some of y'all in order to live, and he just has to exist. So, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, right? It was just one of those really crazy moments from Marvel Comics. Now, then, of course, following that, we get the big moment, probably the single biggest moment in the trailer, which is the voice of Xavier. It sucks we didn't get to see him. If they're gonna play his voice, might as well show his face. It's not like anybody's just like, I wonder who that is. I wonder who that person is whose slightly bald head we could see from the side and sounds exactly like Professor X from the Fox X-Men films. No way it could be him. It's probably just Captain America. Like, no one's thinking that. We all know it's Professor X, so they might as well just say it's Professor X, right? Regardless, it is cool. The other thing about this, though, is that if you look at that stage, right, you look at that whole, I guess, whatever you want to call it, dais, however you want to refer to it, there is somebody sitting on the far left-hand side. And then, of course, you don't really see who's in the middle, but I would say that's probably Professor Xavier because there's chairs everywhere, and you have to believe if it's Professor X, he's probably in a wheelchair, right? So that's probably Professor X in the middle, right? Playing the whole role of like Yoda for the Illuminati, basically. And then you have somebody off to the right, and then you have what looks like Baron Mordo walking in. Now, in terms of the person off to the far left, I would bet all the money in my pockets to all the money in your pockets that that's only one of two people. Either it's Reed Richards or it's Tony Stark. Now, I would say it's probably Reed, because when you have that scene where like Doctor Strange is being taken by the Ultron robots and basically being brought to the Illuminati group, that they're basically calling the members together. And Reed is nothing if not punctual. Well, kind of sometimes. It depends on who's writing the story. But I have to believe that's probably Reed Richards right there. I also zoomed in pretty far, as grainy as it is, and it looks like it would be Reed, but it's kind of hard to tell. There was nothing on the body, as far as I could tell, regarding like lights or anything like that, any kind of glimmers or anything that would look like Tony Stark armor. And if the leaks are true, as far as Tom Cruise is concerned, he looks more like Superior Iron Man, right? It looks more like the Endosim armor. Now, whether or not it is actually the Endosim tech, we don't really know. We won't know until the movie comes out or until we see him in one of the trailers. Of course, I don't really think we will. If Tony Stark does exist in Doctor Strange 2, they're going to keep it under wraps, like the whole Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire thing, where like no one's really going to know until the movie comes out. I mean, we're going to kind of know, right? Like we're going to be like, I mean, we know, but like we're not going to definitively know. But again, you know, it's one of those little things. In terms of the person who looks like they have longer hair, I'm not really sure who that is. My initial thought is maybe it's some alternate reality version of Thor, right? Maybe it's like God King Thor, who basically took over the Odin Force in his universe and then basically replaced Odin, right? I mean, technically it's called the Thor Force when Thor has it, but like ended up replacing Odin. We don't fully know, right? I mean, they look like they have dark hair, but again, they're really far away, they're really, really small, and they're shrouded in shadow. So it's really hard to tell. But regardless, like, I really do believe that's Reed on the far left side, which, fingers crossed, is John Krasinski. I really hope that's the case. Now, following that, we do get a scene where it basically just looks like America Chavez and Doctor Strange just falling through realities. Some of my guys thought it was the Savage Land, and I was like, I mean, I guess it could be, but like when you look at the scene in context and like literally they're falling through portals, it just looks like some alternate reality where maybe humans never evolved or anything like that, or they're possibly falling through an alternate reality where the Savage Land does exist. So for those of you guys who don't know what that is, the Savage Land was actually a place that was basically created by the Beyonders, or created really by another race. I think they were called the Nuwali at the request of the Beyonders. And basically it's a giant game preserve. So literally, like when the Savage Land was created, all flora and fauna across the world, including like dinosaurs and things like that, were all taken to this place and then dropped off. And they basically live there. It's a really lush jungle environment, right? It's literally a slice out of time. And it does have its own civilization. It does have guys that nobody cares about, like Khazar, right? Nobody cares about him. But then you also have a lot of like experiments that go on there and things along those lines. But it is a cool place, right? The Savage Land is pretty interesting. Honestly, I would wager that's just a reality they're passing through. We might only see it for a moment or two, if that at all. Here's kind of the funny thing though, and here's what's so ironic about that, is that's more reminiscent to the original Infinity Gauntlet story than anything that you saw in Infinity War or Avengers Endgame, right? There was a point in Infinity Gauntlet when Thanos was fighting Drax the Destroyer and somebody else, I don't remember who it was, maybe the Hulk, and basically used the time gem and threw them through time, to the point where they actually landed back to the days of the dinosaurs. So that was a really cool thing to see. But it looks like they're just passing through dimensions, right? Not a whole lot going on there. But following that, and this is what's really crazy, you get a scene where it looks like Scarlet Witch is fighting Captain Marvel. Now, one of the other alternatives here, and this I think actually lends a little more credence, is that it's Captain Universe. The popular theory is that it's Captain Marvel. And that's the most practical one, to be honest. I mean, if we're going with like the nature of the MCU, the safe bet is probably Captain Marvel. And it's probably Monica Rambeau's mom, right? That's the most likely case. I kind of thought for a minute there, it sort of looked like Michael B. Jordan. And I think it'd be cool if it was, right? If it was like Johnny Storm from like the Fan4stick movie, give that guy his redemption, right? Because that movie was awful and Michael B. Jordan was the only good part of it. But nonetheless, you know, at the end of the day, it is probably, you know, Monica Rambeau's mom, maybe like an alternate version of herself who became Captain Marvel instead of Carol Danvers, which nobody would complain about. But the thing about this is that if it is Captain Universe, that would be a bigger deal, because someone like Captain Universe could legitimately go toe-to-toe with Wanda, right, with the Scarlet Witch, assuming she doesn't have the life force and she's not like House of M level, where she was at her most powerful and like altering the multiverse. With somebody like Captain Marvel, not necessarily so, but as we know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe plays by a different set of rules than Marvel Comics does. And Kevin Feige and all of them have said, like, the power of Captain Marvel is the most powerful force in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so it kind of makes sense that somebody like that would be able to go against Wanda, assuming Wanda's not using like the full totality of her power. It is a cool thing. One of the other things that I thought would have been kind of cool, because one of the big questions people have is like, what role is Wanda playing in all this? And this idea that Wanda could basically come along and people are looking for a way to like introduce mutants, right? That Wanda could say like, you know, we need mutants or something along those lines. That would seem forced. I don't really know how you make that work, but it would be interesting to have a kind of House of M-esque event where the movie ends and Wanda's like, no more multiverse, and basically wipes the multiverse out. And in doing so, basically those individuals who were able to escape basically do. Again, there's room for that in Marvel Comics, right? I mean, like in Marvel, they did that. They've done that on multiple occasions, right? Like during the original House of M event, you had the White Hot Room where you had like Rachel Summers and I think Psylocke and then Jamie Braddock were all basically hanging out there. It's a place outside of space and time. During the Age of Apocalypse event in the 1990s, when that universe was destroyed, a handful of people like Dark Beast, Holocaust, so on, they basically jumped through the Imcron crystal to escape the collapse of that reality. Nate Gray, X-Man, did as well, just this ridiculously powerful guy. But you've seen that kind of thing happen before. People escaping collapsed realities. Hyperion did it, right, during Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers. Well, technically he was left in the empty space that was two universes when they collided during the incursions. Like, literally, Hyperion survived the destruction of two universes. That gives you an indication of how powerful that is. Like, the guy was ridiculously overpowered. But again, there's room here for them to do that kind of thing. The problem with this is if Wanda were to like reconcile, basically wipe out the multiverse, and they were to use that as a means to consolidate down the Foxverse, right? So like the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, Deadpool, and they were to use that to basically bring together or to consolidate the Sonyverse. So like Andrew Garfield and like Tobey Maguire, stuff like that. How do you explain the purpose of Kang the Conqueror, right? I mean, how do you make sense of that, right? So can they keep that Kang train going if there is no multiverse, right? That's one of the big things, because literally the recreation of the multiverse is why Kang even exists in the first place. But regardless, following that, and this is one of the cool things, Shumagorath. So Shumagorath, or Gargantos, if you want to be a dick about it, he's basically got a change in this trailer. In the first trailer, you saw him, but in this one, you see the exact same thing, but it looks like he's covered in chaos magic. And if that's the case, then perhaps Shumagorath is not operating of his own faculties, that somebody else is. Now, this goes into the next thing, which is basically two Scarlet Witches meeting. That you've got Wanda with the scar on her head, and then you've got like the Scarlet Witch. This looks like Wanda meeting a variant of herself. The other thing about this is that when you get further into the trailer, really towards the end, you basically end up seeing this kind of zoom in shot where you zoom in on Wanda's eye, and despite the fact that she's outside, the inside of her eye looks like a room, and it looks like there's somebody in it off to the side. It's kind of hard to tell, right? It's a little murky there, right? I mean, YouTube compression and all that kind of stuff. And one thing I do want to mention, we do get like zombie Doctor Strange, looks amazing. He kind of looks like Null the symbiote god, right? Like the really cool scene from like the TV spot where he's like walking up all janky, to the top of the mountain and everything. That's cool, right? But like zombie Doctor Strange looks amazing. But here's the thing, and here's what I think is actually going on here. So in that scene, when you see the Illuminati, or you only hear the voice of a Professor X, he says, we should tell him the truth, right? Tell him what's actually going on. I think what's happening here is that the belief is that because of Doctor Strange's actions during the events of like Spider-Man No Way Home, perhaps a few other things he did between the end of that movie and the start of this one, that he was the one who broke the multiverse. I think it was actually Wanda who did it, and I think it's been going on for quite some time. Not only do I think it's Wanda who did it, and like Westview and all that kind of stuff, I think it's Wanda's who are doing it. That basically what's happening here, the reason why Shumagorath looks different is because Chthon had basically found some way to break free. Chthon exists. Chthon seized control of Wanda, and the reason why this matters, why you see like two Wandas, why you see like America Chavez passing through like dead realities, is because essentially Chthon is conquering universes, and Wanda is always the way that he's let in. It's kind of a throwback to like the idea of the Molecule Man, right? So those of you guys who don't know what that means, the Molecule Man's a ridiculously powerful guy, right? He's a guy who can basically control the atomic structure of matter. The name Molecule Man's a misnomer, but he can control basically matter on a multiversal level, right? The guy's just ridiculously OP. But what you learned really years after his introduction is that the Molecule Man was essentially an experiment by the Beyonders, that his origin is the same in every single universe, that his life is the exact same in every single universe, and that the intention was for the Beyonders to basically create the Molecule Man in every universe and to give him all that power in every single universe so that when the time came, they could basically destroy all the Molecule Men at the same time. And when those Molecule Men exploded, they would take their universe with it. Now, I'm not saying that we're getting like this carbon copy of that in this movie, but what I am saying is in every single universe across the multiverse, Wanda's origin is basically the same, right? In some form or fashion, she basically ends up being captured by like some evil force out there, right? Some either whether it's like Hydra or whatever, she's basically given powers and then essentially loses everything and then basically goes insane. And the result of that is in every single one of these universes, Chthon uses that moment of weakness to seize control. And in turn, Wanda is basically the way in which he enters a universe and then wipes it out. Now, maybe something like like Shumagorath, how you explain that, I'm not entirely sure. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it operates by a different set of rules, it could very well be that Shumagorath was created by Chthon, or Shumagorath is yet another person who was basically taken by Chthon and then controlled by him. The reason why I say Chthon here more than anything else is because if you look at Shumagorath, it looks like he's got chaos magic runes all over him. Wanda, we know, uses chaos magic. The source of chaos magic seemingly is Chthon, right? Chthon was the creator of the Darkhold. Like, all the stuff roots back to him. And what better way to introduce him as just this overarching villain than to basically say he's the one controlling Wanda? That when you have that zoom in shot on Wanda's eye, she's the one stuck in that room. She's being controlled, right? She basically is being like moved out of the way. We know that happened from the events of like Secret Empire, right? In Marvel Comics, that when Chthon took control of Wanda, there was nothing she could do. She was literally pushed into the back of her own mind and basically kept in something akin to a cage, right? I mean, they don't really show it per se, they more like say it, but like that's the thing, is like that's entirely possible. And maybe that's the truth that Professor Xavier is talking about in saying that like Wanda is the most dangerous person in the entirety of the multiverse, because in every single universe where Chthon takes hold, Wanda is the reason why. Wanda is basically the portal or the kind of opening he uses to seize control of a person, and then in those different universes, using Wanda, he destroys Doctor Strange, he destroys anybody who could be like a credible threat to him, right? So like all the superheroes on those worlds, and then conquers them and like subjugates them, right? Now, why he's doing that, I don't know. I mean, in the comics, Chthon was just a dick, right? So he was just doing those things because he was a bad guy, right? And that's what bad guys do. But the other part of this is that in Marvel Comics, you have the Dark Dimension, right? The dimension of Dormammu. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you have the exact same thing. But we know that the Dark Dimension is basically a combination of seemingly different dimensions and possibly even other universes that have all been seized by Dormammu, right? Controlled by him, that he's always looking to expand his power. But basically, his universe just kind of grows outward, right? As he conquers a universe, now his universe is twice the size. When he conquers a third universe, his universe is 3 times the size. And they're all places that are subjugated by him. This is kind of a backwards version of the Splinter Realms that we've seen in Marvel Comics. Those of you guys who don't know what that is, there was a point in Marvel where basically the Dark Dimension was just a singular location, right? Just a singular place. But in the old Magic comics, which I think came out in the 1990s, a story that focused on Ilyana Rasputin, you ended up learning that there was some kind of conflict somewhere along the line. And this basically led to the Dark Dimension being shattered, being splintered. And so when Dormammu and Umar came from their realm of the Faltine into the Dark Dimension, they conquered that giant plane of existence, and then everything else was ruled by the Hell Lords. And so the thing about this is that if the multiverse has returned, and now you have universes crossing over, everything's been thrown into disarray, that it's entirely possible that Dormammu lost control of his Dark Dimension. And in doing so, now beings like Chthon and those guys are essentially free. So maybe we're seeing the results of just some kind of demonic war. I don't know. I mean, that's pretty far-fetched even for this movie, but I think it'd be kind of cool, right? Something going on, like something bigger happening behind the scenes than just like Chthon seizing control of Wanda and then just wiping out whole universes or like conquering different universes, whatever the case is. But regardless, let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, right? This trailer was amazing. I absolutely loved it, right? It just had some great moments. Again, like zombie Doctor Strange, like when he's got like all those arms behind him and all that kind of stuff, he looks like Null. And it kind of gives you like these Sinners Market vibes, right? Like in Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, when Doctor Strange sold his soul or tried to sell his soul for 100% of absolute power and couldn't do it because he didn't have a complete soul. His soul was tainted because of like the black magic he'd used over the course of his existence. It's cool, right? It's a really interesting concept. But regardless, yeah, zombie Doctor Strange looks legit. I'm curious what role he's going to play. As it stands now, I count 4 Doctor Stranges in this trailer. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.